Thank you, Savannah, and the band, and I also will take a chance to thank everybody who is setting up everything to make this worship service happen. If you are here just 10 or 15 minutes before the worship service, you see that there's like countless people running along this really narrow little pathway, carrying coffee and all the other things. And I really appreciate that you take time during the Sunday to come and also contribute by giving your time and setting things up at the gathering. You make a difference. As you know, we are very subtle. This is a stewardship campaign, and we are talking about money. And when Lance asked me to preach during the stewardship campaign, I was like, all right, dude, you're asking in Russian. We are not very popular for our, warm and fuzzy ways. We are kind of direct. So here you go. Lance approved it. I thought about what I can share with you, and really, I think that the best message that I can bring to you today is to tell you that about my journey of giving. Now, if you were here last week, you heard that Lance Marshall, who is the pastor who preaches here regularly, he is pretty much a poster child of giving and tithing. Like, he became a Christian, he realized giving is part of the deal, he came to his wife, said, boom, we're going to be giving money to the church, we're going to be giving at least 10%, and then, he continued to do this up until now. So, great, Lance is awesome. That is not my story. For me, giving has always been kind of messy and complicated. First time I ever heard about the concept that you take your money and you give it to somebody and you don't get anything back, not even a receipt. Well, no, you do get a receipt in the church, but in the church where we went back then, there was no receipt. And I was like, whoa, this is strange. Another thing is that in English, you use the word tithe, and you kind of have to be a churchy person to know what tithe means, right? Somebody explained to me after the worship service why tithe has something to do with 10. I don't know, maybe it's Old English. I don't know. So in Russian, it's really straightforward. Even if you've never been to the church, even if you know zero of church language, in Russian we use the word 1/10. That was it. Very straightforward. So the first worship service my mom and I walked to in a little Baptist church, they don't pass the baskets, they pass little sack thingies, and they tell you, 1/10 of what you've got belongs over here. And my mom and I look at each other and we do the math, and we're like, whoa, that's a lot of money. Here's the problem. I'm saying my mom and I, because my mom and I were the ones going to church. My dad stayed at home. In fact, my dad totally was not on board with us going to church. And in fact, he was really mad every single Sunday. Every single Sunday we came back from the church, my mom and my dad had a fight because, according to him, you dragged my daughter and yourself back into that Baptist church. So coming home and telling him that we're not just going to spend Sunday mornings there, those people, we're going to start taking money there. And my dad was the one that produced the income in the family, most of it, that was out of the question. We knew we couldn't do it. So our giving for years, for as long as I've been part of that church, our giving was what my mom could steal from the family little money box without dad noticing. That is what we were able to give. And and it was not much. Because it was very, very little amount. But every single Sunday, some Sundays my mom had nothing. But every single Sunday when she was able to bring some money to the church, she would make sure to give them to me and then ask me to put the money into that sack. And that was her way of teaching me to give. And I knew the whole story behind it. I knew that we stole that money behind Dad's back. I knew that if Dad ever finds out, we're going to be in trouble. But we did it as long as we were members of that church. It was nowhere close to 10th. And I knew that. And I always felt like I looked at families who were joyfully giving, and you could tell that everybody's on board. And of course, they're giving 10% or probably even more. I looked and I was kind of like wondering, almost envious of what is it like to feel that kind of a generosity, to be able to do that as a family. I always wondered about that, but that was not my early experience. So when I went to college, yay, freedom. I'm in charge of my own money. What can go wrong? Everything. Yeah, I was just as responsible with money as a college student can be. And plus, I had very little. So yeah, on the good time of the month, that would mean that I can afford my ramen noodles, ketchup and mayo. That was, by the way, the Russian version of Raisin Cane sauce. We came up with it first. And I could afford a bus to my school and back. Now I think how hilarious that was. When I was looking for an apartment, I knew that I need to be within a 1-hour walk away from the school to be able to make it to school when I don't have money for bus. So yeah, there was part of the month when there was no ketchup and mayo. It was just ramen noodles. And yeah, I was a vegetarian, but not by choice. And yeah, you walk. And I just like as clear as it was yesterday, I remember that on a good day with good weather, it took about 50 minutes of walking. And on a bad day, Russian snow, like all of that stuff that you see on TV, like yeah, it was an hour and 15 minutes. Walk. So, on the good days, usually in the beginning of the month when I would get my allowance, I would come to church and I was excited to give. I was like, oh, I have something. I mean, it was not much, but it was something. I was operating out of scarcity. I didn't know anything about generosity. I didn't know about abundance. I had very little, and out of that very little, I would take even something littler. But I experienced such a joy of giving. I also remember Sundays towards the end of the month when there was no ketchup and mayo and I was walking, not riding a bus, that I brought nothing to the church. And I remember that sack passing by me and the feeling, I don't think it was guilt, but it was that yearning that I really want to put something in it, something, a ruble, something, but I have none. I also will never forget one experience, my very first experience of true generosity. So I worked the entire summer with American missionaries as a translator, and I had very little expenses because they were buying all the food and the bus tickets, so literally I had no expenses at all. And in the end of the summer, they paid me, now y'all get ready, $600. That's the biggest amount of money I've ever held in my hands or was probably even like present where that money was in the room. And I knew that, you know what? I know tithe, which in Russian is 1/10, easy math, would be $60. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give 100. I will never forget that Sunday. I don't remember what the sermon was about. I didn't care. All I could think about is the money that I brought to the church and the joy that I felt when that sack passed me and I was able to put that money in there. It was true joy of generosity. I cannot describe it. Those of you who know what I'm talking about, you know. Feeling that part that I'm part of this bigger family of God. I am contributing. This is my visual, my very material, physical way of contributing to something great that God is doing in this church. I'm here every Sunday. I benefit from everything that's happening in our church, and this is my way of participating, of taking part of it. I will never forget that Sunday. That was the best Sunday, and that also was the best lesson for me to learn what generosity is like. That was also the Sunday when I decided that I want to have a goal in my life, to get to the point where I have the financial freedom to be able to be that generous every single time the Spirit leads me to. I never let go of that feeling. I hold on tight to it. So fast forward, I'm in the United States. I meet my husband. Yay, we finally get some kind of a reasonable income. And like he's a Christian, I actually just saw him in the back of the sanctuary. We both know that giving is part of our faith. We want to do it. We know that we want to at least tithe. We have it all here figured out. Everything's great, except for when it gets to practice. We are all over the place. Sometimes we give, sometimes we do not. We're super generous when the tax return comes in. Oh my gosh, we're so generous. 2 months later, what happened to our generosity? I don't know. We are all over the place. I'm not happy. I'm not at peace about it. I know this is not where I want it to be. This is not the goal that I set for myself on that Sunday when I put $100 offering into the church sack. So. And this is also the time when I'm in a seminary, and I ask myself a lot of questions. Before that, I functioned, I was told to do something by the church, and I did it. And now I'm at a place where I do a lot of thinking. Well, why am I doing it? Am I doing it just because the church told me to? Well, what's the why behind the why? Well, why do we have to give? Well, why is it 10 or more %? Well, what's it all about? Like, when you're in seminary, you have a ton of time to think about this stuff. Once real life comes in, you don't. So I promised Lance not to do it, but I'm doing it, so don't tell him. This is my paper. I wrote it on December 5th, 2012. When I was reading it this week, I'm like, whoa, I was smart in 2012. I don't remember any of these things. I'm like, whoa, I wrote that. That was really good. So that was my project of figuring out this whole giving thing. What's it about and why? In the text that I found, I thought, okay, this is perfect. This is where it's going to get me right there to the core of it. I'm not going to know exactly why, and we're going to get on it with my husband, and we're going to do it. So the text comes from Matthew, and it's about money, of course. Like I said, it's very direct. We're not going to do any dancing around today. So it's from chapter 22, we start at verse 15. If you have your Bibles, find the book of Matthew. It's kind of towards the end. If you don't have a Bible, you don't have it on your phone, we have some Bibles in the back. So just follow me with this text. So as I read this text, I really hoped that this is where I'm going to figure this whole giving thing out and get us on the right path of giving. So then the Pharisees met together to find a way to trap Jesus in his words. They sent their disciples, along with the supporters of Herod, to him. "Teacher," they said, "we know that you are genuine and that you teach God's way as it really is. We know that you are not swayed by people's opinions because you don't show favoritism. So tell us what you think. Does the law allow people to pay taxes to Caesar or not?" Knowing their evil motives, Jesus replied, "Why do you test me, you hypocrites?" What a nice way of talking to people. "Show me the coin used to pay the tax." And they brought him a denarius. "Whose image and inscription is this?" he asked. "Caesar's," they replied. Then he said, "Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to God what belongs to God." When they heard this, they were astonished and they departed. God speaks to us through the reading of the scripture. Thanks be to God. So I read that, and I'm like, so here's real people asking question about money, pretty much asking, so how much, and who should get what out of my paycheck. I thought, as long as I can figure out this whole part about what is God's and what is Caesar's, I'll be able really to put our family budget together. So what I do is I literally write a 22-page paper about that. I'm not going to read it, I promise. But I did find it fascinating that just by reading the Gospel of Matthew and paying attention what the Gospel of Matthew says belongs to God, I found that I'm so organized. I even have this little table here. I was so good in 2012. That, in fact, the gospel says that to God belongs all the money, all the treasures on heaven and earth, by the way. To God belongs all kind of military power and power overall that is greater than any human power. To God belongs the sea and everything in the sea and the land and everything that the land produces. To God belongs food in all kinds of abundance. Remember Jesus feeding crowds? It's because he was able to. It was God's food given away to people. Also, to God belongs our well-being, our lives. Jesus healing crowds of people that came to him. That was Jesus' way of Medicare, by the way, just healing people. Now, how can you put a price tag on that? You can't. Also, we read in the gospel that angels belong to God, and heaven and even life and death itself belong to God. Who can beat that? Everything belongs to God. When I read that, I'm like, well, So what's left for Caesar? If everything's belong to God, what is then Caesar's? So I did a lot of digging. When you're in TCU, you have access to amazing databases. I know I'm a nerd. I'm just so proud of it. And so I did all kinds of research on this Roman writers and what they said belongs to Caesar. What I found out is that Caesar was claiming the same things. He said that you think this belongs to God? Well, no, it belongs to me. Cash, prosperity, abundance, military power, sea, food in abundance, land, people, their well-being, buildings, roads, bridges, even entertainment events. Yeah, all of that belonged to Caesar too. So when I put all of that together, I was like, I'm confused. So when Jesus tells them, give to God what is God and give to Caesar what is Caesar's, that doesn't divide well because they're both claiming the same thing. You're not helping me, Jesus, here. I'm trying to figure out how much to give to the church, and this is not helpful. Yeah, I was very frustrated by the end of writing this paper. So what I had to do was step back and look at the text, look at that story, think about myself, and realize that the people that brought that question to Jesus, it says there that they were going to trick him. And guess what? They got tricked themselves. That's why Jesus gives them the answer he gives them. It's pretty much you figure it out because you're not coming to me with an honest question. So then I had to ask myself, what is then my question that I'm bringing to God? How much? Well, I know. Russian was very transparent, 1/10 or more. Why? Well, because it's part of being a disciple of Christ. That's also very transparent. So what is it that I was struggling with? What I was struggling with was my end of things. Around that time, we also went to Financial Peace University by Dave Ramsey. That changed my entire way of how we deal with money in our family. Two things that really stuck to me was that you tell money where to go, or you will wonder where it went. And I was at that time on the wondering part, not on the telling part. And then the second is every dollar has a name. And that's what we started to do with my husband. I created this masterpiece of a spreadsheet that has every single paycheck, every single bill. It's all color-coded. Those Excel formulas work amazing. You just plug something in and it's like, shows you exactly what it is. And I'm joking about it, but we put giving there first. And in fact, I'm looking right now at Nancy. This week, we talked in my grace group about giving too, and Miranda, another lady in our grace group, said, it's interesting. So we say that God comes first in our faith and in our life, but how come giving is always like right there on the bottom, maybe, if it happens? So true for us. It was really true for us back when we started on that journey. So what we did is, yes, giving was first in the budget. And one of the perks of working at a church is that you can set up your giving right out of your paycheck before it even hits your bank account. So any of you considering ministry, this is one of the perks that you get. So yeah, $220 every single pay cycle. I don't even have to think about it. Now, is it much? Is it like that extreme generosity that I am hoping and working hard for? No. It's a tithe. It's what I call slow and steady. Slow and steady. Because guess what? That same paycheck is being claimed not just by God, but I have my Caesar in my life. And in our case, I'm thinking about the daycare bill. Once it hits, ain't much left. And yeah, I just compared my son to a Roman emperor. With all of the oppressive powers. And my head is about to explode. He's really sweet. So yeah, giving comes first. We set it all up. It comes out slow and steady. I told you all of this information. It's probably TMI, and you're like, oh my gosh, I know more about your money now than I wanted to. I wanted to tell you the story, first of all, to show you that it was never easy. It was never, just like straightforward. I had my ups and downs. I'm honest about it. There's also one lesson that I learned from God on this journey and thinking about my giving. And that is that our God is God of relationships, not transactions. Think about prayer, for example. Prayer is not a transaction. It's your relationship with God. There is nowhere where God tells you, you know what, if you pray for something 3 times, and if you get at least half of your Facebook friends to pray for you, and if you put a little meme there with a cute picture on it, then that's going to happen. No, that's not how prayer works. Prayer is a relationship that you have with God, a relationship that's based on trust, on God's promises, on the assurance that God is present in my life right now, and that is why I'm praying. Not because I'm giving something and God, you better give it back to me, and here's the timeline I'm giving you. Think about learning. Again, learning about God is not, on like how many Bible studies you attended. God doesn't keep attendance sheet of all the stuff that you showed up at the church. We do. We take attendance very seriously. Steve knows about it. We record attendance everywhere. God doesn't. Your learning about God happens in your relationship with God. But please do come to my Bible study. We do a lot of learning. Just joking. Yes, you learn about God by being aware of who God is in your life, what God is doing in your life. Bible studies, worship services, groups, all of that helps. But that's not where the learning happens. Same with giving. Yes, giving is a transaction. It is money. This is how we function. You give money, but this is so much more. Your giving is your relationship with God. And yes, some of you may be at a place of scarcity, like I was. Ketchup and mayo was the highlight of the month. And God knows about that. And there shouldn't be any guilt attached to those who live out of scarcity. But there is also the joy of giving and being generous. And that is something that God also has in store for those who are able to give. Those of you who are like us, slow and steady, there is a blessing in that too, in knowing that every single pay cycle I'm doing something that is part of my discipleship, part of me living out my faith. And it is very material, as material as it gets. It's money, but it's not about transactions. It's about relationships. So this is what I'm leaving you with. For the next week, as you consider your pledges to the church, as you consider your giving, as you think in general, what am I doing with my money? Think of it through the lens of, this is my relationship with God. And that's how it translates into what I do with my money. Let us pray. Loving and gracious God, I thank you for your wonderful gifts, for that abundance that you shower on us through your love, through your grace, through the community of faith where we belong, where we come to worship and be who we are and grow in our faith. And I also pray, God, that you guide us, you help us grow, you expand our vision on what it is that our giving could do to our faith and to our journey as a disciple of Christ. And you bless us, and you be with us, and you walk with us in days of scarcity and in days of abundance. And now, let us all together say the prayer that Jesus Christ taught his disciples to say. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen.